Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Kara Heifel. I am from the Illinois Restaurant Association, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining this webinar today. This topic will be preparing for a successful health inspection, and I'll give everyone a minute to join before we go further. So looking forward to this webinar and everyone logging in. So we'll just give everyone a minute here. All right. So again, good morning. If you missed it, thank you for being here on this important topic on health inspections. During today's webinar, we will hear from an expert at Landmark Pest Management. Today's webinar is also being broadcast in Spanish and Mandarin Chinese. To listen in Spanish or Chinese, please use the interpretation button in your toolbar. This webinar is being presented by us here at the Illinois Restaurant Association in conjunction with the Cook County Small Business Source. Now, the Cook County Small Business Source was initially established from the COVID-19 pandemic, and now it is transitioning to make sure that restaurants and the hospitality industry is able to emerge stronger and ready for growth. We offer, through our partnership, expert guidance and support, and all of this is at no cost to you. There are advising resources and events that connect small business owners with a community of advisors and everyone on this webinar. For one-on-one business advising, sign up at cookcountysmallbiz.org. It's on your screen there, and it's free and very quick and easy, and I highly recommend it to no cost to you. Also, before we get started here today, I want to remind everyone that the Illinois Restaurant Association, myself included, and all of our staff remain a resource to you as the hospitality industry is coming back stronger than ever and we continue to recover. We are focused on guidance, assistance, relief, grant information, and free webinars like this. We also have a number of different resources to you on our website, illinoisrestaurants.org, and you can sign up for our newsletter that provides a lot of great information as well. And we have pro bono legal work and a number of different resources. So want to be helpful to you as a resource beyond this webinar today. And during our webinar, we also have the ability to answer questions that you have throughout the presentation. And if you have a question, please use the Q&A button in your toolbar and type in your questions, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation. And if you particularly like a question or you already see a question in there, just give it a thumbs up so we can prioritize and get to as many questions as we can. I know it's an important topic. Now, without further ado, I want to start this webinar today and introduce our expert panelist, Rebecca Fife, who is the Director of Research of Landmark Pest Management, to guide you through our health inspection webinar. Good morning, Rebecca.
Thank you, Kara.
Take it away.
Great. So we care for a lot of restaurants and partner with restaurants, and restaurants have to follow the food code and the FDA food code. So food safety guidelines are relatively consistent across the United States because the FDA sought to encourage widespread, uniform, and complete adoption of the FDA food code. And every state other than California has adopted it. There is a 2022 version, but it contains only minor updates from the 2017 edition, and Illinois currently uses the 2017 edition. The updates between 2017 and 2022 are pretty minor, but they're worth knowing. I think the most important update between 2017 and 2022 is that sesame was added to the chart of important allergens to be aware of, and MSG was removed. There's also been some vocabulary changes, like shell stock that you have to tag is no longer a term that's used, and shell stock is now referred to as molluscan shell stock. to let you know that they're talking about mollusks. So it's important to know your regulatory standards. Towns, including Evanston, and counties in Illinois that are not Chicago, use the 2017 FDA Food Code plus the Illinois Food Code Part 750 as their minimum enforcement standards. However, Chicago has its own version called the Chicago Food Code. And one example of a difference between the FDA Food Code and the Chicago Food Code is that the FDA Food Code does not contain the word mask or specify what items a restaurant must have for cleaning up vomit or diarrhea, while the Chicago Food Code lists items that must be in the cleanup kit, including gloves, face mask, disposable mop heads, or other comparable items used for cleanup. So if you're a restaurant in Chicago, you need to have the exact kit that's specified in the Chicago Food Code. And if you are outside of Chicago, then you can sort of devise what you think belongs in a kit. If you're not in Chicago, it's important to know whether your municipality or regulatory body uses the 2017 FDA Food Code plus the Illinois Food Code 750 as is, or whether they add their own unique language that you're also expected to know and follow. Some towns have their own unique flourish about signs you might need to post that are above and beyond the 2017 Food Code and the Illinois Food Code Part 750. So that's the minimum enforcement standard statewide, but regulatory bodies can add their own criteria on top of that. So we're going to focus today on the Chicago Food Code. The Chicago Food Code is 281 pages long, so we can't get through all of it, but we will cover the most common reasons for health inspection failures so that you can avoid them. So health inspection frequency, there are routine health inspections and complaint-based health inspections. So once a food establishment is licensed and operating, a health inspector will periodically conduct unannounced inspections. According to the Chicago Department of Public Health, risk category 1 establishments, which are full-service restaurants, are inspected twice per year, but it's really more like once per year that those inspections happen. And risk category 2 establishments that more assemble food. Oh, I need to slow down. The interpreter's telling me to slow down. Risk category 2 establishments are inspected once per year, according to CDPH, but they really do those inspections more like every other year at this point. The FDA recommends that risk category 1 restaurants are inspected 3 times per year. So we don't have the capacity at this point to hit that regulatory goal, but the city has increased its frequency of inspection. So they're happening more often than they used to. And I think that Chicago is really benefiting from it. Then there are complaint-based inspections. So the CDPH receives around 4,000 complaints against food establishments each year. In response, the CDPH health inspectors conduct unannounced inspections at the establishments. So there are 2 main types of priority violations at restaurants that should be prevented to keep your restaurant inspection ready. And here they are. So there are priority violations, which is an immediate threat or high risk of causing foodborne illness. This category includes occurrences such as inadequate storage temperatures, improper food handling practices, improper personal hygiene, rodent and insect infestation, lack of hot running water. If priority violations cannot be corrected immediately while the inspector is there on site, the license will be suspended and the food establishment must close temporarily. And once the violations are corrected, the food establishment operator must sign an affidavit stating the violations have been corrected and schedule a follow-up inspection. And then it takes about 2 days after that for them to be allowed to reopen. Then there are foundation violations, which are called priority foundation violations. And these could allow a threat to arise. Since I'm a wildlife manager, I look at these like endangered versus threatened when it comes to wildlife. So foundation violations kind of threaten a serious, foodborne issue to arise, where priority violations are like it's present, the bacteria is there, or the conditions for it are immediate. So this category includes occurrences such as no certified food manager on site, no written employee health policy, food not properly protected from contamination during storage, preparation, display, service, or transportation, or inadequate pest control frequency, qualifications, or documentation. So when it comes to pest control, a priority violation, the category that you see in the red box, would be there's actually pests. So there's mouse droppings, cockroaches, flies, an actual pest that's causing a threat. Whereas the pest control priority foundation violations in the yellow box, that could be there's no pest control logbook, there's no contract with a pest control vendor, it's not pests on site. So it's a condition that could contribute to pests. So I did a meta-analysis of recent pass and fail rates in Chicago, and I'd like to share that information with you. Between May 11th and May 18th, 2023, which is the most recent week for which data are available, 36 restaurants failed their health inspections in Chicago. The total number of restaurants inspected during that time period is 160 restaurants. 124 of them, or 77%, passed their inspections, and 36 of them, or 22%, failed their inspections. Pest issues were implicated in 19 out of the 36 failures, which is 52% of failures having pests on site was involved. Let's evaluate some of these case studies to see what we can learn from them. The first case study, here's what the inspector wrote was the reason for the failure. No consumer advisory regarding raw, undercooked food on the menu, improperly stored wiping cloths, dirty prep table, and greasy vent hood. So let's look at each of these issues that caused them to fail and find where in the law it states how to do it right. So no consumer advisory regarding raw and undercooked food on the menu. The city actually provides you with a copy of this advisory, which I've linked to later in this presentation in my helpful links section, and you will receive this slide deck. So you're going to receive all of these links, and they require you to post this in the restaurant. So this restaurant that failed its health inspection didn't have this posted. And here's what the Chicago Food Code states. The license holder shall inform consumers of the significantly increased risk of consuming such foods by way of a disclosure and reminder using brochures, deli case or menu advisories, label statements, table tents, placards, or other effective written means. The next issue that caused this restaurant to fail its health inspection is improperly stored wiping cloths. The Chicago Food Code states cloths in use for wiping food spills from tableware and carryout containers shall be maintained dry and used for no other purpose. Cloths in use for wiping counters and other equipment surfaces shall be held between uses in a chemical sanitizer solution and laundered daily. And cloths in use for wiping surfaces in contact with raw animal foods shall be kept separate from cloths used for other purposes. So a lot of times inspectors will come in and they'll see wet cloths laying on counters, even laying on cutting boards, and that's a violation. The other thing this restaurant was cited for is a greasy vent hood. And working with so many restaurants and becoming really close friends with our restaurant clients, the saddest thing that can happen is a fire. And the couple of restaurateurs who I've known who have experienced fires, they were indeed grease fires. So the Chicago Department of Public Health and the Department of Buildings takes this really seriously. And the food codes states non-food contact surfaces of equipment shall be cleaned at a frequency necessary to preclude accumulation of soil residues. So they failed for a greasy vent hood, among other things. And let's look at the second case study. Here's what the inspector wrote. They failed because of no certified food manager on site while food was being made, no employee health policy, no metal stem thermometer, several prep coolers without thermometers, and mouse droppings. No food certified manager on site is a really common reason why restaurants fail. The Chicago Food Code states a certified food manager, which is an 8-hour course, must be present when food is being prepared, held, and served. At risk category 1 restaurants, the food manager needs to have undergone allergen awareness training, which is a 1-hour course. And additionally, everyone who touches food must undergo food handling training, a 3-hour course available online for only about $15. And the other violation that they had is no employee health policy. So again, the city requires you to post a notification telling your employees that they're not allowed to work if they have a communicable illness that could cause foodborne illness. So the city gives you a notification to post. I recommend that you use theirs, but you could make your own comparably acceptable notifications, but it's great to just use the ones that they provide to you. And again, this is also in the helpful link section of the slide deck that you're going to receive. But in addition to posting a notice, which is a sign, you need a policy. So the city also provides a sample health policy that you can adopt as your policy, and that is also in the helpful links that you'll receive with this slide deck. The food code states that restaurants must have a written employee health policy that details how employees are informed to report information about their health, gastrointestinal symptoms, and diseases that are transmittable through food. An employee health notice must also be posted. And this restaurant also had no metal stem thermometer on site and several prep coolers without thermometers, which is not allowed. The Chicago Food Code states a metal stem thermometer shall be available on site to check the internal temperature of time temperature control for safety foods. Each mechanical refrigerated unit shall be provided with a thermometer that is accurate to +3 degrees Fahrenheit. The FDA standard is 2, so Chicago is a little bit more generous with 3. And how would you know that the chicken breasts that you're serving or the ground beef that you're serving has reached 165 degrees for at least 15 seconds to be made safe to be able to be served? Or if you're holding those foods cold and you're going to reheat them to serve, you need to assess that they've reached that safe temperature of 165 for 15 seconds. And you really can't know that without a STEM thermometer. So if there isn't one on site, it's really clear that those food safety standards aren't being met. Let's talk about our third and final case study. So the inspector said that the food is at an improper cold holding temperature. The cooler is at 47 degrees, which is too high. It needs to be 41 or lower. No certified food manager on site while food was being made. No advisory on the menu regarding raw or undercooked food. Food handlers without training certificates, and no one with allergen training on site. Food at improper cold holding temperatures is a big problem because, as you know, there's a danger zone when it comes to high risk foods that is 41 degrees to 135 degrees, up to 135 degrees, just under 134 degrees, let's say, where rapid bacterial growth and toxin production takes place. So food should be moved through that danger zone as quickly and deliberately as possible to get it to safer temperatures. So the Chicago Food Code states that time and temperature control for safety food, hot and cold holding, shall be maintained at 135 degrees or above, or 41 degrees or below. And this restaurant also had its cooler at 47 degrees. And the Chicago Food Code states that restaurants must have a refrigerator that is capable of maintaining a temperature of 40 degrees Fahrenheit or below, and a freezer capable of maintaining a temperature of 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Additional reasons the restaurants failed, we didn't have time to do a case study for each one. So anything that wasn't mentioned in the case studies we covered, I put on this list. They failed because no employees must wash hands sign. Again, that's a sign the city provides. You can print it out and put it up, and it's in my helpful links attached to this presentation, so you'll have easy access to it. Mold or microbial growth, black or pink buildup in an ice maker. This is something I personally see when I inspect restaurants. So if there's any kind of material accumulation, microbial growth in the ice maker, it's really important that it immediately gets unplugged, fully emptied, cleaned and sanitized before it gets put back in use. No covered trash in the female bathroom. The trash can in a female bathroom and also the trash receptacles provided for customers to use have to have covers on them. They can't be open trash. No self-closing device on the bathroom door. No kit on site for responding to vomit or diarrhea. There were live cockroaches. Another restaurant had live flies on their onions. Many had no pest control logbook. Gaps under the doors that allow pest entry. Missing splash guards for hand washing sinks that are next to food prep. Dusty vents. No soap at cook line, employees' food handler certificates were expired, or a food handler was found prepping without having washed their hands. So let's talk about how to pass your inspection. So these helpful links are one of the keys to passing your inspection. And I think it's really important that you check them out. So the first link is the City of Chicago Food Code rules. You can use that whole document as a checklist to audit your site to make sure you're in full compliance. You also need the vomit and diarrhea cleanup procedures plan. You can write your own because the city provides a sample that they find acceptable. I would recommend that you use their sample plan, which is linked here. You also need an employee health policy. And again, the city provides a sample. I would suggest using theirs. You have to post an allergen notice. And again, there's that link to that sign. You have to post an employee health notice. There's the link to it. You have to post a customer advisory about raw or undercooked foods. There's the link to it. You can print it. You need an employees must wash hands sign in English, and you also need it in Spanish if there are Spanish speaking employees who don't speak and read English. And you need to post a no smoking sign, and you need to post washing hands instructions in English and also in Spanish if you have personnel who exclusively speak Spanish. So that's what you need for Chicago. If you're outside of Chicago in the rest of the state, then your regulatory documents are not the Chicago Food Code rules. They're the FDA Food Code 2017. And I also included the FDA Food Code 2022, even though Illinois hasn't adopted the 2022 version yet. There's also the Illinois Food Code Part 750, which is important to review. And the Illinois Department of Public Health produced a very helpful vomit and diarrhea cleanup procedure example. You can adopt that as your procedure. And Landmark Pest Management is also available to schedule a free on-site pest control consultation for any restaurant with one of our experts. And you can schedule that by email or by calling. So let's talk about pest control. And I'm going to say some things that surprise you because I visit a lot of restaurants and I'm called in to solve the hardest to solve problems when pest control vendors have been telling restaurants for years that a cockroach problem or a mouse problem or a rat problem just can't be eliminated. And they're doing their best, but they just can't eliminate it. That's when I get called in. And the restaurant owners and general managers often tell me, I know you can't completely eliminate the cockroaches, or I know we'll never really be rid of this mouse problem. And you can get rid of any pest control issue. It's just a matter of how far we need to go, including structural modifications to solve it. So let's talk through the common pest issues. So contracting a pest control vendor is not enough. If you still have pests, your pest control is not sufficient. So the city requires that you have a pest control vendor. They require a logbook on site. They require a minimum of 2 visits per year. But if you still have pests, even though you're in compliance in other ways, you're not in compliance because you also have to maintain a pest-free facility. German cockroaches do not enter from the sewer system. So an infestation of German cockroaches should be able to be completely abated by a competent pest control vendor within 90 days. Ongoing German cockroach infestation generally indicates incompetence or nonfeasance on the part of the pest control vendor. And having German cockroaches at your restaurant is optional suffering because it can be completely eliminated. Oriental and American cockroaches are a bit trickier because they populate the sewer system and they enter through dry drains that lack water in the P-trap and through uncapped lines. If a structural modification, like fixing broken plumbing, needs to be made to prevent them from entering, competent pest control efforts can prevent them from being able to reproduce within the restaurant until the necessary repairs are made. So you might not be able to keep them from coming out of a broken pipe, but you can keep them from being able to establish a breeding population in the restaurant until that pipe is repaired. Mice and rats need to be sealed out structurally, and the indoor population can be fully abated once holes or penetrations through which mice and rats are entering are sealed. Rats can actually burrow underground for 15 feet once they break out of broken infrastructure pipes, and they can come through penetrations or damage to a foundation or slab next to plumbing penetrations and get into wall voids or between floors. So all of that needs to be investigated and remedied to really solve an indoor rat problem if they're coming in through the infrastructure of the building. And we approach that with a multiply skilled team of masons, roofers, plumbers, who are all experts in pest control and specialize in sealing rats out. Drain cleaning and elimination of small fly harborage. Most restaurants need a drain cleaning vendor to prevent small flies. They should contract a drain cleaning vendor in addition to their pest control vendor. Pest control and drain maintenance are 2 different scopes of service, and they're both important. So this is one drain vendors program. I don't know all of the drain vendors in Chicago. There may be many wonderful vendors. So this is just one that I'm familiar with their services. They service many of our clients. And so I'm not endorsing this company, although I do know them to be excellent. So you can do your due diligence and find a drain vendor that you want to work with. But this is the optimal design for a drain vendors program. So this particular vendor does deep drain cleaning, which they recommend twice per year. I think they do like steam jetting or something amazing that gets them sparkly clean so that they don't trap residue in protein solids. And then they apply a monthly gel treatment that prevents things from clinging to the pipes and prevents that food from being available to the development of small flies. Small flies have a really short life cycle. So unless you have weekly pest control at your site, you need a drain vendor. And unless your team keeps your drains really clean, you need a drain vendor. And they also need to get under equipment in difficult to reach drains. And if you ever have a stinky drain, that is a sign that there are protein solids that pests can exist in. If you see any small flies, you need to call a drain vendor. So choose a drain vendor who you want to work with, and please get them under contract to prevent small flies in your establishment. The next 14 slides are a useful checklist that you can use to audit your operations to determine whether you're inspection ready. In the interest of time, and so that we save ample time for questions, please review these next slides on your own. I'm going to briefly describe each one, but then once you receive this slide deck, please run through these as a checklist to make sure that your restaurant is inspection ready. Time and temperature relationships. This is incredibly important, and this is something that the health inspectors are going to audit because, in my opinion, it is the #1 cause of foodborne illness is that the food is stored, high-risk foods are stored at the danger zone, the wrong temperatures. Protection from contamination. This is also incredibly important, and all of the bullet points on this slide are very common issues that cause failures. Water and hot water. So this is incredibly important, and the temperatures that water is for when you're going to be wearing gloves and not having direct contact with it for washing dishes needs to be 120 at all faucets, and for hand washing it needs to be between 100 but not greater than 120. Liquid waste disposal. All liquid waste properly drains to an approved and fully functioning sewage disposal system. This is incredibly important, and that all sinks drain properly. When protein solids can back up in drains, that really contributes to a lot of small flies. And we see a lot of mop sinks and slop sinks and mops stored wet and slop sinks that don't drain, with big fly populations coming out of the mop or slop sinks. So that is incredibly important. Vermin and pest control. This one I'll cover the whole slide since it's my specific area of expertise. And like I said, it's not merely enough to be in compliance with your documentation. The facility actually needs to be free from insects and rodents. Outside doors and screen doors are in good repair and have rodent-proof door sweeps where needed to prevent gaps under the doors. The facility is constructed and maintained so as to prevent entrance of vermin, including window screens. Air curtains are operating properly and are in good repair. So the CDPH doesn't require you to have air curtains, but if you have air curtains, they have to be working properly or you'll be cited for having a broken air curtain. That's how it is with all equipment. If you have a piece of non-required equipment and that piece of equipment is broken, get it out of your restaurant, because you're not allowed to have non-working equipment and you can be cited for it even if it's not a required piece of equipment. The pest control logbook must contain at least 2 service reports per year and the pest control vendor's business license. Any recommendations made by the pest control vendor have been resolved, such as a directive to clean up droppings or remove clutter or harborage. The minute your pest control vendor, or let's say the day your pest control vendor walks out the door of your restaurant, if they specify that anything needs to be changed or fixed, like there's some mouse droppings under a shelf in the basement, or while I was here today inspecting under the ice maker, I noticed that there's some mold in the line under there and I want to bring it to your attention. So anything that is specified by your pest control vendor, please resolve that immediately, because it goes in your pest control report and that doesn't harm you in any way that it's in your report. In fact, inspectors have more confidence in the operations of your restaurant if your pest control vendor points things out. What they're looking for, though, is that you've responded to those. So if your pest control vendor pointed out droppings on Tuesday and the inspector shows up on Friday and the same droppings the pest control vendor pointed out are still there, that's a problem. So please resolve any of those recommendations really quickly. And you should be receiving your pest control reports by email as well as having them in the book. And please be in the habit of reviewing them immediately and thoroughly when you receive them. Food service sanitation manager certificate. So at least one employee of every food service, of every risk category 1 restaurant has to be certified as a food service manager with that 8-hour class. At least one of them has to also have allergen awareness training. It's a great idea to get more of your team members allergen awareness trained because it's so important, but at minimum, someone has to have it. And all employees have to have their food handler training certificates. And it's also very important to make sure that food items and food-related products are protected from dirt and contamination. I saw a health inspection citation recently where ready-to-use containers were put back in a storage room and they were out of their original packaging and weren't covered in some other way. And the health inspector told the restaurant that had they just wrapped them in plastic because the original packaging was disposed of, that would have been compliant. So it's incredibly important to make sure that you've audited these standards and that you're storing everything correctly. And hazardous substances, you never want to have your own pesticides on site. Don't have a can of Raid, don't have anything like that, because that can be a problem when it comes to your inspections. Don't do your own pest control. You have to have a licensed professional do the pest control. Food storage. So this is really important. Shelving needs to be a minimum of 6 inches off of the floor. This is something that is especially a problem in basements because, restaurants are at a premium for space. So they'll have shelves that are 6 inches off the floor, but then they'll store things in front of them so that those stored items aren't 6 inches off the floor. And that is often something that they're cited for clutter or having things that are improperly stored. And next one, please. And again, the importance of thermometers. Please audit all of this. Please use this checklist to evaluate your site because an inspector could walk in tomorrow. And I hear a lot of restaurants say, we already had our inspection a month ago, so we don't need to prepare for an inspection for a long time. You can have a complaint-driven inspection anytime. Those are unannounced. There are 4,000 of them a year in Chicago. So even if you just had your health inspection a month ago, you still need to be inspection ready all the time. And physical facilities rules, we often see restaurants cited for a toilet room used by females not having a covered trash receptacle. So pay particularly attention to that, but these are all really important. These are the most common physical facilities citations of restaurants in Chicago based on our data analysis. Signs and requirements. This is another really common reason that restaurants fail health inspections. I have furnished you with all of these signs and sample policies in my helpful links section. So please run through them, make sure you have them, grab them and print them from there if you don't. And when the inspector comes, they're going to have a conversation with the person in charge. So the person in charge is the person who needs to be there at all times, who has the food manager license. And you need to know what the role is of the person in charge, food employees. What is the person in charge's responsibility for preventing the transmission of foodborne disease by an employee who has a disease or medical condition that may cause foodborne illness? What are the symptoms associated with the diseases that are transmissible through food? How does following time and temperature control rules help prevent foodborne illness? What is the risk of eating raw or undercooked meat, poultry, eggs, or fish? What are the minimum safe cooking temperature and times for meat, poultry, eggs, and fish? What are the required temperatures and times for safe refrigerated storage, hot holding, cooling, and reheating of time temperature control for safety food? How can you prevent foodborne illness by managing cross-contamination, hand contact with ready-to-eat foods, hand washing, and clean surfaces and equipment? Which foods are identified as major allergens, and what are the symptoms that a major allergen could cause in a sensitive individual who has an allergic reaction? Explain the correct procedures for cleaning and sanitizing utensils and food contact surfaces and equipment. Explain what toxic substances are and describe the procedures necessary to ensure that they're appropriately stored, dispensed, used, and disposed of. And if your establishment requires a HACCP plan, be ready to discuss it. So these are questions you'll need to answer during your health inspection. And it's really, we can borrow a really great skill from the construction industry. So on every construction site, when they start the day's work, they do something called a toolbox talk, where they have a safety conversation about one topic. It would be amazing to start your restaurant shifts going through one of those questions that restaurants need to be accountable for health inspections, and having that toolbox talk with your team to not just present the knowledge once or have it presented during someone's food certification, but to sort of keep that knowledge in a liturgical cycle where it's on a schedule of when that information is repeated, to make sure that it's top of mind for everyone. So I'm going to open it for questions now, but I know that restaurants, have to be sensitive about their reputational issues. And if there are questions that you might prefer to discuss privately rather than asking them in this forum, I am available to answer questions privately as well. And I've put my contact information on screen. So thanks, and let's have some questions.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. This was a lot of information that everyone needs, whether they like it or not, want to talk about cockroaches or not. But obviously, this is great information. Thank you. Let's get to some questions here. So, how many failed inspections before an establishment gets shut down?
That's a great question. So it depends on the severity of the violation. So if it's one of those priority violations that can't be corrected while the inspector is on site, that's enough to shut it down right there. And they can't reopen until there's proof that it's been resolved. And if it's less serious issues, then there are re-inspections that can take place multiple times, and the city charges for those re-inspections. So they will come out and do them, but there is a fee that's paid to have re-inspections to pass.
Really? Speaking of re-inspections, you mentioned that you can have an inspection just based off of a customer complaint at any point in time, and there was 4,000 in the city of Chicago last year. How many of those are actually warranted, like actually come up with violations?
That's a good question, and I would be happy to run that number to determine how many complaint-driven inspections result in a violation or a serious violation that causes a failure. But I saw a number of them just in this, 1 week of data analysis, where some of these inspections were complaint-driven, and the inspectors at one of them didn't find any serious violations, and at another found at least a dozen serious violations, and the establishment was temporarily shut down.
Oh, wow. And someone asked, where can these links be found? And I want to remind everyone that they will get all this presentation as well as the links to this after this as an attendee, and you can find them, Rebecca, at least for Chicago, the Department of Public Health. Is that the best link otherwise?
Yes. So the Chicago Department of Public Health page, they have a restaurant specific page. There are a lot of links there. I have all of those links and more in my slide that is titled Helpful Links. So you can click all of those links in that slide called Helpful Links.
Thank you. And another question we have that just came in: how often should drains be cleaned?
So it depends whether the drain has any dirt or material in it. So drains should be cleaned anytime there's material sticking to the walls of the drain or accumulating. So for many restaurants, that the restaurant cleans them themselves, who do a great job at it, they actually unscrew the cover, remove the cover, and put what looks like a giant bottle brush, a drain cleaning brush, down the drain weekly, and then flush it with a bucket of water. So weekly, if restaurants are doing it themselves, if they hire a drain cleaning vendor who has gel-based products to prevent material from adhering to the walls of the drain and prevent that from supporting the fly life cycle, then monthly is generally adequate.
Got it. Thank you. Next question. What kind of violations do you see in restaurants that are most reportable?
Well, the violations that we covered in our case studies are the most common ones, and the list that I gave you. So not having, the proper food service licenses, but there are really simple things that I think it's a Martin Luther King quote where he said, the measure of a man, isn't what you do when, people are looking, but it's what you do when no one is looking. And that's very true in restaurants. Maintaining that really high standard of management when you're not facing an inspection and no one's around means that your team members are going to be in those habits and do the right thing when someone is looking or when there is an inspector there. So when I, as a vendor, am in restaurant kitchens and I walk around and I'm kind of cringing because I see the wipe towels laying on the cutting boards with no one standing there, and I see them on the counters, and I see people whose beards are more than an inch long with no beard net, or I see someone, really quickly deal with some thawing chicken and without washing their hands really quickly, move a salad bin or something. I see all of these things happening. So luckily it's me and not an inspector, because the inspectors are unannounced. They could have just walked in the kitchen back door and they could be seeing all those things. So taking the opportunity to just run an incredibly tight ship where education is always front of mind, and in our company culture, we call that see something, say something, where anytime something isn't done correctly, we have to discuss it. We have to say something every single time. No one is allowed to ignore anything. And I think that's really great. And I think the best restaurants also incorporate that, where they're comfortable giving that correction, having that conversation. Team members are encouraged to give each other reminders and create a see something, say something culture.
Absolutely. And when you mentioned that health inspectors will just show up unannounced, what will they present to you? How do you know that they're a real health inspector?
So you can ask them to see their ID and they will be able to show you a health inspector ID. And upon showing you that, you have to admit them and present all of the records and give them access to any areas they request access to. And the first thing that they say after they announce themselves and show their ID to you is they ask for the person in charge or the person who has the food manager license. So if that person isn't present, that is just going to be a failure right out of the gates. So that's the first and most important thing that they ask about.
Absolutely. We've had reports of people misinterpreting or misrepresenting themselves as health inspectors. Have you encountered that at all?
I haven't seen anyone misrepresenting themselves, but a couple of our restaurant clients have told us that they had fake inspectors show up, and we don't know what they're doing there. We don't know if those are vendors who want to get in. We don't know if those are, competitors or people who want to take photos that could be embarrassing, or whether it's someone trying to steal expensive restaurant equipment. We don't know what the motivation of those people is, but it's important for many reasons not to keep restaurant back doors open when there's not actively a delivery going through them. So the health department requires doors to be closed when deliveries aren't actively passing through the door. So if the delivery's done, don't prop that door. That's not an acceptable way to get ventilation. A screened window is a much better way to get ventilation, or mechanical ventilation, but it's not okay to have an open door. And that's also a way that pests, wildlife, or people who don't have good intentions can come in. So we have to think about our safety as well as pest standards by keeping doors closed.
Absolutely. That's good advice. We've definitely had a number of people asking us about that. So you mentioned that sign posting. Where do you need to post the allergen signs that you covered?
So the food code is slightly flexible about where those are posted. They can be on the menu, they can be placards that are on the table, little tent cards. There are some different options. So you can read the options and do the one that's best for you. Since that is so important and you don't want someone to have an allergic reaction in your restaurant, I would say put it on the menu and put it on the wall. And I dine out a lot. We love to go give our business to our restaurant clients. And I love that every time I sit down at a table in Chicago now, I'm asked if anyone in our party has allergies. That's so important. And I think restaurants are doing a great job of integrating that important question into their service culture.
Okay, next question we have here is that if a restaurant shares a space with another entity, who would be liable for an infestation if it was from the other entity? Do you know?
I do. That is such a great question. So many restaurants have the luxury of owning their buildings and being in freestanding buildings, but many of them don't. And you have a landlord and you have shared walls, and it can be incredibly difficult. And I can tell you a little case study from my own personal experience where we provided pest control to a very high-end restaurant, and they have an immaculate kitchen. They do everything perfectly. They're the gold standard, yet they had German cockroaches in their ceiling voids. So I told their GM, I can see that they're coming, from above this shared wall. Can I get permission from your landlord to go into that space? Do you know what's in that space? And he said, well, let me check. So he talked to his landlord, and the landlord said, no, I don't want to give permission for your pest control vendor to go in there, but we'll contact the tenant in that space and we'll tell them to have their pest control vendor investigate it. So a few weeks later, it was 20 times worse, because what happened is their pest control vendor went in and did what's called a bug bomb, which is a repellent product. You should never use repellent products for cockroaches. It drives them deeper into the walls and worsens the problem and scatters them. It's a really bad thing to do. So they did this bug bomb, and all of a sudden the cockroaches are driven even more into my client's restaurant. So sometimes I think it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. So when I was visiting my client, I saw the door propped open. Another reason not to prop doors, because I might come in. I saw the door propped open, and there was that room right there where the issue was. And I just popped my head in and said, hello, is anyone here? Trying to communicate with someone that was there. Well, they weren't there, but I saw that room, and it was a garbage chute room from apartments above, and there were hundreds of cockroaches climbing the walls. The pest control standards in there were absolutely horrible. So I documented that with photos, and I shared them with my client, and I said, this is what you're up against. Your immaculate restaurant has basically a garbage dump on the other side of the wall, and we need to talk to your landlord. So we ended up talking to the landlord, and the landlord put together a meeting between me, our client, the other tenant, their pest control vendor, and the management company. And what they decided in that meeting is, because I'm the expert and I'm brought in to solve the hardest to solve problems, that we will create the pest control plan for both my client's space as well as the adjacent space. And then their vendor needs to comply with it. and furnish documentation and proof, and that we get to subsequently inspect that space periodically to make sure we're satisfied with their efforts. So we got to specify what materials they use, that they're non-repellent materials, the frequency of application, the quantity, the method of application. And that was how we solved that issue for our client. So our client, if they were inspected when they had German cockroaches pouring through their ceiling, they would have failed their health inspection, even though the cockroaches were coming from the other space. And we had to not just do pest management, but do people management, stakeholder management to advocate for our client. And they are now a pest-free facility, which they deserve to be. So I hope that answers your question, Wally.
Absolutely. Wow, that was a great question and an incredible story. Thank you so much. I think that's all we have for the questions. And I want to remind everyone before we end today that you will get all this information that includes the links through an email right after the conclusion of this. And furthermore, it will be on our website, illinoisrestaurants.org. And I also want to thank Rebecca. You've been great today. And our partnership with the Cook County Small Business Source, we always remain a source to you from the IRA and the Cook County Small Business Source. And again, thank you, Rebecca. This is great information. Everyone needs it, and I appreciate all of it. Everyone have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.